Carson here with Checks Vans. Welcome back to our channel. Today we're going to be installing this window into the side of this Mercedes Sprinter van. Alright, so for tools for today's job, we have a die grinder, an impact with a step bit. We have some double cut shears, also an air saw. We're going to need an air compressor to run those. This right here is our adhesive to actually adhere the glass window to the side of the van. I have a couple different punches here. Then we have some primer that's going to prime up those bare metal edges so we don't get any rust down the road. Some tape to help me with the cut. I've got some 1/8 inch spacers right here. These help space that window so it's even around the entire side of the van. Right here we also have some suction cups to help me place the window up onto the van. Alright, so the first step and the most important step is actually test fitting your window, making sure that you are cutting out the correct location for your glass. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this over, grab my suction cups right here. It's always good too when you're doing this, set something down on your work area so that you don't damage your glass or scratch it up. So I'm going to pick this up now, come over to my location. All I'm doing here is just confirming that I have the right window for the right spot before I do any cutting. So, confirmed that that fits. Now we'll head on over and start cutting out this window. Here we are now on the inside of the van, the sliding door window. I'm going to tape lines here so that it can remove these braces for the sheet metal. And I'm going to use my double cut shears to cut these. So I'm just essentially taking some masking tape, following the body line right there, and just taping it down. Alright, so I've got my gloves and my glasses on now. I got my double cut shears. It's time to cut these supports out of here. Alright, so now I have those 4 supports cut right there. All you gotta do is just grab a hold of these. Be careful because the sheet metal is very sharp. Just pull it off like that. Alright, so at this stage, now that we have these supports out of the way, essentially what we're doing is punching a bunch of marks from the inside to the out using a center punch. There's a couple different ones you can use. You could use an automatic. I personally prefer this one with the hammer. It's just a little bit quicker and I'm pretty good with it. So we're going to go around the outside here of this line all the way around the window, and essentially what that's going to do is give us our template to cut from the outside of the van. So here we are now on the outside of the van. It's probably going to be hard to pick up on the camera. However, there's a bunch of lines or dots now from that center punch going all the way around, basically giving me a cut outline. So the next step here is take some masking tape, go ahead and mask off where all of these little dots are, give yourself a nice template, and we'll come in and we'll cut it out. Now that I have my fine line tape on there, you can really see where we're going to be cutting this window out. I'm going to come back with some thicker masking tape just to help protect this paint surface right here, because I don't want those double cut shears to nick any of the paint and for it to possibly rust down the road. Okay, so here we are now. I have everything outlined. We're getting prepared to cut. What I have to do is essentially drill 2 holes in each corner. So I'm going to drill a hole like right about here, here, here. So what these holes are going to allow me to do is it's going to allow me to come in with the air saw and cut these corners, and then I'll go back with the double cut shears and I'll cut all the straightaways. The reason that I do it in that order is that the air saw vibrates quite a bit, so the more material you remove, the more vibration that's caused. So it's always good to do those double cut shears second. So I'm going to drill these out now with a step bit, and then we'll begin the cutting process. Now I have those holes cut out, grab my air saw. I'm gonna do the bottom 2 curves first and then work my way up to the top. Don't be scared to grab a new blade. These things wear out really quickly and it's gonna make your life a lot easier if you have a brand new blade. All right, so here's a little example of a mistake that I made. My blade's a little dull, and so I have it in here. And what I'm doing is, you'll watch me as I'm trying to cut here. There's 2 issues that's happening. 1, my blade's dull, and 2, there's a lot of vibration in this corner right now. So it's not holding the sheet metal steady enough to allow the blade to reciprocate through and cut. So what you'll see me do is I'm actually pulling the blade physically back and forth. And what can happen is this blade can kick out and then it can just bounce on the sheet metal. Fortunately, this doesn't matter in this area because we're actually removing all of this. But say you were coming around a corner here and you were doing this method, you could actually nick up the sheet metal, and depending on your window, that could be visible from the outside. So if this is happening to you, I just recommend replacing the blade. And if it's still happening with a new blade, what's happening is that the sheet metal is shaking. So you can actually just, put a hand on it and brace that sheet metal to allow that blade to cut properly. So something I do here in the corners as well is you'll see I cut 2 little slits. I don't go all the way, and I like to actually reach in here and fold the sheet metal back. There's 2 reasons for this. The first is when you actually go to, cut these final lines, this thing's gonna wanna drop. So if you have a second pair of hands with you, they can comfortably reach in here and grab a hold of this without, cutting their fingers. Second reason is it actually makes it a lot easier for you to start those double cut shears because the sheet metal is up and out of the way. So you've got a set of jaws here on the back of the shears that you're gonna need to get up and under that sheet metal, and you're essentially pinching it there. So with this out of the way, it just allows this tool to work a little bit easier. All right, so now that I'm done using the air saw, I'm gonna jump over to the shears. Essentially the same steps. I do the bottom, the sides, and then the top. The top being last because this piece of sheet metal will fall. So I'm gonna want somebody helping me hold that so it doesn't damage, the exterior of the van or the inside. So while you're using the shears, you'll have this little pigtail form. It's very important if this pigtail is kicking out to the left or to the right, if it's gonna damage any paint as it starts to curl up, I always grab it with my other hand and just pull it up and out of the way. All right, so now that we have that sheet metal removed, what you'll notice is there's essentially a double wall of sheet metal here. The outside is what we cut, the inside we did not cut, and the inside is the diameter we need to ensure that our window fits properly. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna take the die grinder and this outside edge that we just cut, I'm gonna sand that down so that it's the same diameter as the inside sheet metal wall. I'm working in between basically an 80 grit and a 120 grit sanding disc, just taking my time, knocking that down and smoothing up all of these rough edges. So here we are, ground down all the edges there, cleaned up all my cuts. I am going to test fit the window. You'll notice how there's this little edge right here that wraps up. That essentially fits right in the hole that we just cut out. So you want to test fit it, make sure that you cut it out large enough, ground it down large enough, and if there's any areas, you can have someone stand inside of the van and they can mark with a Sharpie if you need to take off any more material. So now that I confirm that fits, I'm going to remove this tape, prime all of the edges with a one-step primer, and prepare the window for install. All right, so now that we're done smoothing off those edges and peeling off that tape, there's a lot of dust left over from that die grinder. I'm gonna take some Simple Green, spray it on the side of the van, get all that dust off of there, and I'm gonna come through and I'm gonna use a paint cleaner to clean up this bare metal in preparation for the one-step primer. Here we are now, got our edges cleaned up, all of the adhesive removed. I've got my one-step primer. This window that I'm using comes all the way out to this outside lip, so I can use quite a bit of this and don't really have to worry about getting it precisely on there. At this stage as well, keep in mind, if your blade might have slipped and nicked any of the clear coat or paint, just take a quick glance all the way around and hit that with primer if you need to. Here we are, we have our primer on there. I'm going to take some 120 grit sandpaper and I'm just going to go ahead and scuff up this paint. You don't want to cut through the paint because you don't want it to rust, but just essentially giving yourself an extra little bit of grab there on the adhesive that we're going to use. Some windows, not all windows, come with this rubber trim. At this stage, before the window actually goes in, it's a lot easier to do it now than it is once that window's in. So you're going to need to cut this to length. It snaps on that inside sheet metal wall. So go ahead and put it on there. And keep in mind too, there's going to be a seam wherever you cut it. So wherever you want that seam, I usually go for near a corner. So here we are, I've got a little bit of excess. Essentially what I'm going to do is cut this with a knife. I always cut it a little bit larger and then I just start to shave it down until it fits perfect. So just keep that in mind. You only get one chance to do this. Here I am now, I'm going to prepare the adhesive. Use whatever adhesive they send you. Today we're using the Scuffing P2G. I'm going to cut the tip here. I always go at a little bit of an angle like that, and then on the back edge, cut a V into it. That's just going to allow you to deposit a little bit more adhesive onto the metal. So now we're going to put on the adhesive. A little tip for starting, keep in mind this is a window, so rain, water, it's going to want to seep down in here. So I always like to start here at the bottom, work my way all the way around, and I try to make at least one tube stretch the entire way. If I do have to stop, around here or whatnot, just make sure you put on enough adhesive to where you're not going to have any issues with leaks. So as I work my way around here, I'm essentially trying to get that adhesive right into where I scuffed up that paint. And you also want to make sure you don't get too far to the outside of where this might squeeze past the actual glass window. This stuff's very sticky and it doesn't move that much or squeeze out that much. So you don't have to be too careful, but just keep that in mind as you go around. So now we have good coverage, a nice solid bead all the way around. At this stage too, if you think you missed a little spot, you can add some more on. This window has a tail that hangs over to about here. So what I'm going to do now is just do a couple little beads. This isn't for anything more than just support on that glass, so that maybe when you're driving down the road it doesn't rattle. All right, so I'm going to grab my spacers and my tape now. Suction cups on the windows. A second set of hands is always preferred. So here we are, compress that glass down on that sheet metal. Compressing that adhesive down. Next step is I'm going to put these spacers around the bottom of the window and the side here, just ensuring that we have a nice even 1/8 of an inch all the way around. I'm going to take my tape and then tape it to the glass, just holding that window in place. All right, so now that we have this window in here, it's taped up, nice and secure. We're gonna let it dry for 24 hours. We can then take the tape off, these spacers out of there, and we like to pull the vans outside, just water test them, make sure that we don't have any leaks. That's it for today's video. Thanks for watching. As always, like, subscribe, and comment if you have any questions.